At 11:23 p.m. on the 12th of April 2020, the National Weather Service office in Morristown, Tennessee, issued a tornado warning for Hamilton County. The warning stated that a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located near Harrison, moving northeast at 50 miles per hour. Radars had detected strong rotation in the storm's mesocyclone. Meteorologists watched the signature tight. They had already been monitoring this supercell for more than an hour as it tracked across southeastern Tennessee. The atmosphere was primed for violent weather. That Easter Sunday had seen dozens of tornado warnings across the region. This one was different. At 11:25 p.m., a tornado touched down about 3 miles southeast of downtown Chattanooga. It crossed the Tennessee River near the Chickamauga Dam. The first structures it hit were industrial buildings and warehouses along the riverfront. Security cameras captured a sudden flash and the sound of tearing metal. Witnesses reported the sky turning a deep green, then black. The wind shifted from a steady rain to an eerie stillness, then a roar like a freight train. The tornado was a half-mile wide at this point. It moved directly through the heart of East Chattanooga. Residents in the affected neighborhoods had little time to react. The warning was issued only 2 minutes before the tornado struck. Some received it on their phones through the wireless emergency alert system. Others heard outdoor sirens in the distance, but by the time they recognized the sound, the power was already out. The tornado moved at forward speeds of around 50 miles per hour. That left most people with less than 90 seconds to find shelter. Many did not make it. The storm ripped through the Hickory Valley area first. Apartment complexes and single-family homes took a direct hit. Roofs were torn off, exterior walls collapsed, cars were lifted and thrown into adjacent yards. Trees snapped at the base, their trunks splintered. One witness described the sound as a continuous explosion. By 11:27 p.m., the tornado had crossed Interstate 75, flinging debris across the highway. Several vehicles were caught on the road. Drivers had no way to see the tornado in the dark until it was directly on top of them. Emergency dispatchers in Hamilton County began receiving calls at 11:26 p.m. The first reports described a massive debris cloud, a large section of the city without power, and people trapped in collapsed structures. Fire departments from Chattanooga, East Ridge, and Red Bank all responded. Ambulances were sent to multiple locations simultaneously. The initial incident command was set up near the intersection of Gunbarrel Road and Shallowford Road. That intersection was the approximate center of the damage path. At 11:30 p.m., the tornado crossed into the Brainerd area. This was a densely populated residential neighborhood with older homes and mature trees. The damage here was catastrophic. Many homes were flattened to their foundations. Others were shifted off their anchors. The tornado's winds were estimated at 160 miles per hour, making it an EF3 on the enhanced Fujita scale. That rating was later confirmed by the National Weather Service survey team. The path width was 750 yards. The length of the damage track was just over 10 miles. At 11:35 p.m., the tornado lifted near the intersection of Moore Road and Bonnie Oaks Drive. The storm cloud continued north, but the rotation had weakened. The total time on the ground was approximately 12 minutes. In those 12 minutes, the tornado killed 5 people. More than 60 others were injured. Over 300 structures were damaged or destroyed. Hundreds of families were displaced. The financial loss was estimated at over $100 million. What happened? The Chattanooga tornado was part of a larger outbreak that produced more than 140 confirmed tornadoes across the southeastern United States between April 12th and 13th, 2010. That outbreak was the second largest tornado outbreak in U.S. history by number of tornadoes. It was also one of the deadliest, with a total of 35 fatalities across 6 states. The Chattanooga tornado was the deadliest single tornado in Tennessee that night. Meteorologically, the setup was textbook. A strong upper-level trough moved eastward across the central United States. A surface low-pressure system developed over the Mississippi Valley. Warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico surged northward into Tennessee. At the same time, a dry line moved east from Arkansas. The combination of strong wind shear, high instability, and abundant moisture created an environment ideal for supercell thunderstorms. The Storm Prediction Center had issued a moderate risk for severe weather in the region 2 days in advance. On the morning of April 12th, they upgraded parts of the southeast to a high risk. That is the highest threat level the SPC issues. Forecast models showed the potential for long-track violent tornadoes. The SPC's convective outlook used the phrase significant tornado event in its discussion. Local National Weather Service offices issued special weather statements throughout the day, warning residents to have multiple ways to receive warnings. Despite these forecasts, many people in Chattanooga were caught off guard. The storm arrived after dark. The tornado was rain-wrapped, meaning it was obscured by heavy precipitation and nearly invisible. Radar signatures showed the debris ball, but the average person on the ground could not see the funnel until it was too late. What went wrong? The question is not simple. The National Weather Service did issue a tornado warning before the tornado touched down. The lead time was approximately 2 minutes. That is within the acceptable range for a fast-moving tornado in a complex storm environment, but it is dangerously short when the event occurs at night. Many residents did not hear the outdoor sirens because sirens are designed to warn people who are outside, not inside their homes. The wireless emergency alert system sent a message to cell phones in the warned area, but some phones were on silent mode. Others were being charged in another room. Some people simply did not check their phones before going to sleep. There were also missed signals. A previous tornado warning had been issued for a different cell in the same area about 40 minutes earlier. That storm produced a brief tornado in nearby Bradley County, but it was weak and caused minimal damage. Some residents in Chattanooga may have become complacent after that warning expired without any impact. In the time between the earlier warning and the deadly one, the atmosphere continued to destabilize. The supercell that produced the Chattanooga tornado was the same storm that had dropped a tornado in Bradley County. It intensified as it crossed the river. In the aftermath, the National Weather Service surveyed the damage track. They classified the tornado as an EF3 with estimated peak winds of 160 miles per hour. That rating was based on the destruction of well-built frame homes, the uprooting of large trees, and the debris pattern. The survey team also noted that some of the most severe damage was consistent with an EF2 to low-end EF3. The tornado did not produce the extreme damage signature of an EF4 or EF5, but it was still the strongest tornado to hit Chattanooga in decades. The city of Chattanooga had not experienced a tornado of this magnitude since the 1970s. Building codes in the affected areas were not designed to withstand winds of that speed. Many homes in the Hickory Valley and Brainerd neighborhoods were older, with unreinforced masonry or weak roof-to-wall connections. When the tornado hit, those structures failed quickly. Mobile homes in the storm's path were completely destroyed. The fatality count likely would have been higher if the tornado had struck a few hours earlier when more people were awake, or if it had moved through a more densely populated area like downtown. First responders worked through the night. Search and rescue teams went door to door looking for survivors trapped in collapsed homes. Power lines were down across the city. Roads were blocked by debris. The Tennessee National Guard was activated to assist with traffic control and security. The American Red Cross set up shelters for displaced residents. In the days that followed, the city held memorial services for the 5 victims. Their names were released to the public over the following week. They included a mother and her young son, a retiree, and 2 neighbors who had taken shelter in the same house. The oldest victim was 73. The youngest was 8. Investigators also looked at the broader system of tornado warnings. After the outbreak, the National Weather Service conducted a service assessment. Their report found that warning accuracy was high for the outbreak as a whole, but that nighttime tornadoes posed unique challenges to public response. The report recommended improvements to the way warnings are communicated, including more targeted alerts and better integration with social media and local media partners. It also urged residents to have a plan for nighttime severe weather, such as keeping a weather radio in the bedroom. Why does the Chattanooga tornado still matter? First, because it happened on Easter Sunday. For the families who lost loved ones, the holiday that is supposed to be about renewal became a day of grief. The emotional toll of losing a home or a loved one on such a symbolic day deepened the trauma. Second, because it highlighted the limits of technology in predicting and warning for tornadoes at night. Even with the most advanced radars and forecasting, a tornado can touch down with only minutes of notice. When that happens, the margin for error is razor-thin. Third, because the recovery from the tornado was complicated by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The outbreak occurred just 1 month into the national lockdowns. Social distancing made shelters more difficult to operate. Volunteers had to wear masks. The economic impact of the pandemic made it harder for families to afford repairs. The Chattanooga tornado also forced the city to re-examine its emergency preparedness. After the event, officials installed additional outdoor warning sirens in underserved neighborhoods. They launched public education campaigns about nighttime tornado safety. They partnered with local television stations to encourage the use of wireless emergency alerts. But the fundamental problem remains. Fast-moving tornadoes at night are among the hardest natural hazards to survive. The human factors of sleep and darkness are not something radar can overcome. In the years since, meteorologists have studied the Easter Sunday outbreak extensively. The Chattanooga tornado has been the subject of research papers on warning lead times, social vulnerability, and building resilience. The data from that night continues to inform how the National Weather Service issues warnings and how emergency managers plan for worst-case scenarios. The question of how to give people more time remains open. 2 minutes was not enough. The next tornado might not give even that. At 11:32 p.m. on April 12, 2020, the supercell responsible for the earlier Bradley County tornado crossed the Tennessee River into Hamilton County. The storm had already produced a brief tornado near Cleveland, Tennessee about 40 minutes earlier. That tornado had been weak, rated EF0 to EFone with winds no higher than 86 miles per hour. No one was killed, but the storm was not weakening, it was reorganizing. The mesocyclone tightened. The updraft strengthened. Radar showed a debris ball forming as the storm passed over open fields east of Chattanooga. At 11:36 p.m., the National Weather Service in Morristown, Tennessee, issued a tornado warning for southeastern Hamilton County. That warning included the communities of Ultua and Collegedo. The warned polygon covered areas south of Interstate 75 but did not yet include the city of Chattanooga itself. The storm was moving northeast at 45 miles per hour. The warning stated that a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was detected. The hazard was broadcast on NOAA weather radio and sent through the wireless emergency alert system. But the warning expired without a tornado touching down in that polygon. The storm briefly weakened as it ingested slightly cooler air from the river valley. That lull lasted less than 10 minutes. At 11:44 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a second tornado warning for the same storm as it approached Chattanooga's city limits. This warning was issued at 11:44 p.m. with a statement that a tornado-producing debris was located near East Brainerd, moving northeast at 45 miles per hour. The warning said the tornado would be in the Hickory Valley area around 11:48 p.m. and in the Brainerd and Glenwood areas by 11:52 p.m. The lead time for the initial touchdown was approximately 4 minutes, but the tornado was already on the ground by the time the warning was issued. The first reports of damage came at 11:47 p.m. from a spotter near the intersection of Gunbarrel Road and Brainerd Road. The tornado touched down at 11:47 p.m. in a residential area just east of the Chattanooga Metropolitan Airport. The path of the tornado was narrow, only 200 to 300 yards wide in most places. But it was enough. The first structure hit was a frame house on Bayberry Drive. The roof was lifted and the exterior walls collapsed inward. The family inside had taken shelter in an interior bathroom. They survived with minor injuries. The house next door did not have a bathroom with interior walls. The occupants had no basement because the water table in the region made basements impractical. They huddled in a hallway. The tornado removed the entire second story. The father was pinned under debris and the mother suffered a broken arm. The children were pulled from the rubble by neighbors who arrived within seconds of the wind stopping. At 11:48 p.m., the tornado crossed Brainerd Road into the Hickory Valley area. This was the hardest hit section. The tornado maintained EF3 intensity as it passed over a cluster of ranch-style homes built in the 1950s and 1960s. These homes had brick veneer exteriors and asphalt shingle roofs. Many had no structural ties between the roof and walls. The wind lifted the roofs, and then the walls collapsed outward. In one block, every single home was either destroyed or sustained major structural damage. The debris field was concentrated enough that search teams had to use chainsaws to cut through collapsed roof trusses to reach trapped residents. At 11:50 p.m., the tornado reached the Glenwood community, a neighborhood of smaller homes and apartment complexes. The tornado weakened slightly to EF2 intensity but remained powerful enough to collapse carports and overturn vehicles. A gas leak from a ruptured line ignited, causing a small fire that spread to two adjacent structures. Firefighters were delayed because debris blocked access to the street. They arrived at 11:58 p.m., but by then the homes were fully engulfed. No deaths occurred in that fire, but 3 residents were treated for smoke inhalation. At 11:53 p.m., the tornado exited the city limits and moved into unincorporated Hamilton County near the community of Birchwood. The tornado lifted at 11:55 p.m. after being on the ground for 8 minutes. The total path length was 7.5 miles. The maximum width was 400 yards. The damage survey later confirmed that the tornado was on the ground continuously from 11:47 to 11:55. The rating of EF3 was assigned based on wind speeds of 140 to 160 miles per hour, determined by the destruction of well-anchored frame homes and the snapping of large hardwood trees. The story of the 5 deaths begins in the seconds before the tornado hit. The first victim was a 73-year-old woman living alone in a ranch house on Harper Street in Hickory Valley. She had no basement, no storm shelter. Her house was one of the first to collapse. Neighbors found her body in the living room. She had been watching television when the tornado struck. The second and third victims were a 32-year-old mother and her 8-year-old son. They were in the same house on Harper Street, taking shelter in a closet near the kitchen. The closet was an interior space, but the roof was attached to the walls only by toenails. When the roof lifted, the walls fell outward and the closet collapsed. They were buried under brick and lumber. The fourth victim was a 41-year-old man who lived down the street. He had been asleep in a bedroom with an exterior wall. The wall collapsed onto the bed. Rescue crews found him 2 hours later. The fifth victim was a 64-year-old woman who was visiting a neighbor. She had not wanted to stay alone in her apartment. The neighbor's house was a 1-story brick structure with a crawl space. The crawl space entrance was blocked by a car that had rolled into the house during the storm. She and her husband crawled under a heavy table. A chimney fell through the roof and struck her. She died at the scene. The investigation into the warning process began almost immediately. The National Weather Service office in Morristown conducted a service assessment of the entire Easter Sunday outbreak. The report, published in October 2020, analyzed the lead times for each tornado that day. For the Chattanooga tornado, the official lead time was 2 minutes from the issuance of the warning to the first damage report. But the report noted that the storm had been producing a tornado for at least 1 minute before the warning was issued. The warning was based on radar detection of a debris signature, but the debris signature did not appear until the tornado was already on the ground. This is a known limitation of Doppler radar. Radar beams scan several thousand feet above the ground. A tornado can form below the lowest beam and not be detected until it has already started causing damage. In this case, the storm's low-level rotation tightened rapidly in the 5 minutes before touchdown. The radar data showed a strong mesocyclone at 1,500 feet, but the tornado touched down before the forecaster could confirm a debris signature at lower levels. The weather forecasters involved in that warning had been working for 12 hours by the time the Chattanooga storm moved into Hamilton County. The outbreak began in the morning, with tornadoes across Mississippi and Alabama. The shift change had not occurred because the event was ongoing. The forecaster who issued the warning was experienced, but was monitoring multiple storms simultaneously. The storm that produced the Chattanooga tornado was one of 5 supercells being tracked at that hour. The forecaster had to prioritize. The decision to issue the warning at 11:44 was based on a combination of radar trends and spotter reports from the previous tornado in Bradley County. The forecaster later testified that he waited for confirmation of a debris ball before issuing the warning because false alarms had been an issue earlier in the day. 2 previous warnings had expired without tornadoes. The risk of crying wolf weighed on the decision. The report also examined the communication of the warning. The wireless emergency alert was sent to all cell phones in the warned polygon, but the polygon was large, covering parts of East Brainerd and Hickory Valley. Some residents later told investigators that they did not receive the alert because their phone was on Do Not Disturb mode. Others received it but ignored it because they had received several warnings earlier in the day that did not result in a tornado in their area. One survivor said she saw the alert appear on her phone at 11:46, but by the time she read it, the power had already gone out and the house was shaking. The lead time was too short for any meaningful action. The outdoor warning sirens in Chattanooga are activated by the County Emergency Management Agency. The sirens were not sounded for this tornado because the decision to activate them is based on reports of a tornado confirmed on the ground. By the time a sighting was received, the tornado was already in Hickory Valley. The sirens would have provided no additional lead time. This is a systemic issue in many communities. Sirens are designed for outdoor notification, not for waking people inside their homes. In the Easter Sunday outbreak, the sirens sounded in some areas only after the damage had already occurred. The human toll of this tornado was compounded by the pandemic. The search and rescue operation had to be conducted with personal protective equipment. Emergency management officials set up a unified command post in a parking lot near the damage zone. Volunteers were screened for symptoms. Shelters were established in gymnasiums and churches, but capacity was reduced to allow for social distancing. The Red Cross distributed meals in individual boxes instead of communal meals. The disaster recovery process was slowed because insurance adjusters and contractors were working remotely or limiting in-person visits. Many families stayed in hotels or with relatives for months because FEMA temporary housing was slow to arrive due to pandemic-related delays. The longer-term investigation into the tornado also focused on building codes. Hamilton County at the time did not have a countywide building code that required hurricane ties or concrete anchors for residential structures. The state of Tennessee had adopted the International Residential Code, but enforcement varied by jurisdiction. The city of Chattanooga had adopted the code, but exempted existing homes. Many of the homes destroyed in the tornado were built before the code was adopted. The upgrades required to make them tornado-resistant would have been cost-prohibitive for most homeowners. The question of whether stricter codes could have saved lives remains debated. In the Glenwood area, 90% of homes built after 2004 survived with only roof damage, while 60% of homes built before 1980 were destroyed. The data suggests that modern building practices did make a difference, but only for those homes that had been retrofitted or built after the code update. In the months after the tornado, the city of Chattanooga launched a public education campaign called Know Your Zone. It included maps of tornado risk areas, instructions for sheltering in place, and a recommendation to purchase NOAA weather radios. The campaign also emphasized the importance of having a plan for nighttime storms. Identify a safe room, keep a flashlight and shoes near the bed, and set your phone to allow emergency alerts even during Do Not Disturb mode. The local chapter of the American Red Cross distributed more than 5,000 weather radios to low-income households in the years following the outbreak. The meteorological community also studied the storm in detail. A research paper published in the Journal of Operational Meteorology in 2022 analyzed the radar data from the Chattanooga supercell. The paper found that the storm's low-level mesocyclone intensified from 200 meters per second squared to 1,200 meters per second squared in the 5 minutes before the tornado touched down. That is an increase of 6 times. Such rapid intensification is common in tornadic storms, but is difficult to detect with scanning radars. The paper recommended the use of rapid scan radar technology, which can update every 30 seconds instead of every 2 minutes. The National Weather Service has since deployed rapid scan radars in a few test sites, including Oklahoma and Alabama. Chattanooga is not one of them. The deeper question raised by the Chattanooga tornado is whether the current warning system is adequate for nocturnal tornadoes. The average lead time for tornado warnings in the United States is 13 minutes, according to National Weather Service statistics. But that average includes daytime events with high visibility. For nocturnal tornadoes, the average lead time drops to 8 minutes. For tornadoes that form after midnight, it drops further to 5 minutes. In the case of Chattanooga, the lead time was 2 minutes. The human response time to a warning is typically at least 60 seconds. For someone who is asleep, it can be 2 to 3 minutes just to wake up and recognize the danger. That leaves no time to reach a safe location. The only way to survive a nighttime tornado with a 2-minute warning is to already be in a safe room. The tornado also exposed vulnerabilities in mobile home parks. No mobile home parks were directly hit in Chattanooga, but one was located within a mile of the damaged path. The residents of that park had no access to a community storm shelter. The county had applied for FEMA grants to build shelters in mobile home parks in previous years, but the applications were denied due to funding limitations. After the tornado, the county reapplied and received funding for 3 shelters. The first one was completed in Tuzirat-Watwo. It can hold 60 people. The nearest mobile home park has 112 residents. The economic cost of the tornado was estimated at $42 million in property damage. That number includes insured losses only. Uninsured losses, including deductibles and damage to uninsured properties, likely brought the total to over $60 million. The majority of the damage was concentrated in Hickory Valley, where the median home value was $135,000. Many families did not have replacement cost coverage. They received only the actual cash value of their home, which in some cases was less than $50,000. The recovery in that neighborhood has been uneven. 5 years after the tornado, 3 of the destroyed lots remain vacant. The families who lived there either could not afford to rebuild or chose to move away. The ceremonial aspects of the aftermath were also poignant. On the first anniversary, the city held a virtual memorial service because of pandemic restrictions. The names of the 5 victims were read aloud. The mayor spoke about resilience. The following year, a small park was dedicated at the intersection where the tornado first touched down. The park has a berm designed to double as a storm shelter, with an underground concrete structure that can hold up to 50 people. It is the first public storm shelter in that part of the city. It was built with donations from a local manufacturing company that had employees living in the damaged area. The larger legacy of the Easter Sunday outbreak is that it forced the National Weather Service to re-examine how it communicates urgency. In 2021, the agency introduced a new category of alert called the tornado emergency, which is issued only when a confirmed tornado is expected to cause catastrophic damage and loss of life. The Chattanooga tornado would have met the criteria for a tornado emergency. The new category is designed to cut through warning fatigue by using more severe language. It also triggers automatic activation of wireless alerts at the highest priority level, bypassing the user's Do Not Disturb settings. The first tornado emergency was issued on March 25, 2021 in Alabama. It has since been used dozens of times. Whether it improves survival remains to be seen. The unanswered question is whether any system can solve the fundamental problem of a tornado that forms at night with no warning. The Chattanooga tornado was not a long-track monster. It was a relatively short-lived supercell that produced a brief but violent tornado in a populated area. The forecasters saw the potential. The public was told to expect severe weather. But knowing that a tornado might happen is not the same as knowing where and when it will hit. The cone of uncertainty at the county level is still measured in hundreds of square miles. The average person cannot live in a state of constant readiness for a threat that may or may not materialize. The tornado also leaves a personal legacy for the families who survived. The 8-year-old boy who died was a student at a local elementary school. His classmates later planted a tree in his memory. The tree was blown down during a derecho in Tuzirat-Watwo. They planted another one. The mother who died was a nurse at a nearby hospital. She had worked the previous night shift and had been sleeping when the tornado hit. Her husband survived because he was in the living room and dove under a couch when he heard the roar. He spent 3 hours under the debris before being rescued. He never returned to the house. The 73-year-old woman had lived in her home for 40 years. She had survived a house fire in 1995 and a flood in 1998. She refused to leave her home during severe weather because she believed the walls would protect her. The walls did not protect her, but her neighbors said she was stubborn in a way that defined the old neighborhood. After her death, the city council passed a resolution encouraging residents to identify safe rooms and practice drills. The Chattanooga tornado is not a story of systemic failure. It is a story of a system that worked up to a point and then could not do any more. The forecast was accurate. The warning was issued. The response was professional, but 2 minutes was not enough. The tornado did not care about the pandemic, the building codes, the warning fatigue, or the holiday. It crossed the river and then crossed the city. The people who died were in the wrong place at the wrong time, but the place was their home and the time was a Sunday night. The investigation did not find anyone to blame. It found a gap between what science can predict and what a human being can do when the lights go out and the wind comes through the wall. That gap remains. The next tornado might not give even that. At 5:58 a.m. on April 13, 2020, the first search and rescue teams entered the Hickory Valley neighborhood of Chattanooga. The sun had not yet risen. The power was still out across much of the area. The teams worked by flashlight and headlamp, stepping over debris that had been a house an hour earlier. The temperature was 48 degrees. A light rain was falling. The conditions were miserable, but the work was methodical. The teams had to check every structure, every pile of wood, every overturned vehicle. They knew 5 people were missing. They did not yet know whether anyone else was trapped. By 7:14 a.m., the first body was recovered. It was the 73-year-old woman who had lived in her home for 40 years. She was found in the remains of her living room, still in her nightgown. The medical examiner later determined she died from blunt force trauma to the head and chest. The cause of death was consistent with being struck by debris while the structure collapsed around her. She had no defensive wounds. She likely never saw the tornado coming. At 8:02 a.m., the second victim was located. It was the 8-year-old boy. He was found under a collapsed wall in his bedroom. He had been sleeping in the lower bunk of a bunk bed. The upper bunk had been thrown across the room. The bed frame was twisted metal. The mattress was gone. The boy's father had been in the hallway when the tornado hit. He survived with a broken arm and a concussion. He told responders that he had tried to reach his son's room but was thrown backward by the wind. He did not remember anything after that until he woke up in the hospital. By 9:30 a.m., all 5 victims had been recovered. The last one was a 34-year-old man who lived alone in a small house near the end of the damage path. He had no family in the area. His body was not identified until 2 days later through dental records. He had moved to Chattanooga only 6 months before the tornado. He worked at a warehouse distribution center. His coworkers said he kept to himself. His landlord said he had paid rent on time every month. The tornado destroyed his house completely. The only recognizable object left was a metal mailbox with his last name still visible. The search and rescue operation was officially concluded at 1:28 p.m. on April 13th. No other fatalities were found. But the operation was only the beginning of a longer process that would unfold over months and years. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, arrived in Chattanooga on April 15th. They set up a disaster recovery center at a community college campus. The center processed applications for individual assistance, including grants for temporary housing, home repairs, and other needs. Over the next 6 weeks, FEMA approved approximately $3 million in assistance for residents of Hamilton County. The average payout was about $8,000 per household. For many families, that amount covered only a fraction of their losses. The Small Business Administration also made disaster loans available. The SBA offered loans of up to $200,000 for homeowners to repair or replace damaged property and up to $2 million for businesses. Interest rates were as low as 1.4%, but the application process was complex. Many residents did not have the documentation required to prove ownership or income. Some had lost all their paperwork in the storm. Others were renters who did not qualify for the same level of assistance. The recovery was uneven from the start. One of the most difficult aspects of the aftermath was the mental health toll. The Chattanooga tornado struck during a global pandemic. The city was under a stay-at-home order at the time. The usual support networks, neighbors, friends, churches, community centers were largely inaccessible. People could not gather. They could not hold vigils. They could not meet in person to share their grief. The Disaster Recovery Center was open, but visitors had to wear masks and maintain distance. Counselors were available by phone, but many people said they needed in-person connection that was simply not allowed. A study conducted by the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga in 2021 surveyed residents of the Hickory Valley neighborhood 6 months after the tornado. The study found that 43% of respondents reported symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. 28% reported symptoms of depression. 12% reported increased alcohol use. The study also found that people who lost their homes were significantly more likely to report mental health problems than those who only experienced property damage. The study's authors noted that the pandemic compounded the trauma, making it harder for people to access care and harder for them to feel a sense of normalcy. The tornado also left a physical mark on the city. The damage path was approximately 1 mile long and 400 yards wide. In that area, the landscape was transformed. Trees that had stood for decades were snapped or uprooted. Houses were reduced to slabs. Cars were mangled and stacked. The debris was hauled away over the course of 3 weeks. The city used temporary debris management sites to process the material. In total, an estimated 92,000 cubic yards of debris was collected. That is enough to fill about 40 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The debris included everything from splintered wood and broken glass to personal belongings like photographs, toys, and furniture. Some of those belongings were later recovered and returned to their owners. A local church organized a lost and found effort. They set up a tent near the damaged area where people could bring items they found and look for items they had lost. The tent operated for 6 weekends. The church reported that about 70% of the items were eventually claimed. The remaining items, photographs, letters, a child's stuffed animal, a set of keys, were stored in a box in the church basement. No one ever came for them. The question of why the tornado formed so quickly and violently became a subject of scientific investigation. The supercell that produced the Chattanooga tornado was part of a larger outbreak that spanned multiple states. Meteorologists later described the atmospheric setup as unusually favorable for tornado development. The jet stream was positioned directly over the Tennessee Valley. A strong low-pressure system was moving east. The atmosphere was extremely unstable, with high moisture and strong wind shear. The ingredients were there. What made the Chattanooga tornado stand out was the speed of its intensification. Research conducted by the National Severe Storms Laboratory in 2021 looked at the radar signatures of the Chattanooga supercell. They found that the storm's mesocyclone, the rotating updraft that spawns tornadoes, exhibited a phenomenon known as rapid mesocyclone intensification. In the 4 minutes before the tornado touched down, the mesocyclone's rotational velocity increased from about 25 meters per second to over 50 meters per second. That is an increase of 100%. Most tornadoes show a more gradual intensification, often over 10 to 15 minutes. The Chattanooga tornado compressed that process into a few minutes. The implications of this finding are significant. If a tornado can form in less than 5 minutes from the moment the mesocyclone starts rotating, then the current warning system, which relies on detecting rotation before issuing a warning, may not always be fast enough. The National Weather Service's average tornado warning lead time is about 13 minutes, but that average includes storms that develop slowly. For storms that develop rapidly, the lead time can be much shorter. The Chattanooga tornado is an example of a worst-case scenario, a rapid-forming, low-precipitation supercell that produced a tornado with almost no warning. The question of whether climate change played a role in the Easter Sunday outbreak is a matter of ongoing debate. Scientists have established that climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of severe thunderstorms in the United States, particularly in the southeast. Warmer temperatures allow the atmosphere to hold more moisture, which fuels stronger updrafts. Warmer sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico, a source of moisture for many Tennessee storms, have also been linked to more intense storms. But attributing a single event to climate change is difficult. The Easter Sunday outbreak could have occurred in a world without climate change. The question is whether it was made more likely by it. A study published in 2022 by researchers at Columbia University attempted to answer that question by modeling the atmospheric conditions of the Easter Sunday outbreak in a world without human-caused warming. The study found that the conditions that produced the outbreak, high moisture, strong wind shear, and low-level instability, were about 40% more likely to occur in the current climate than in a pre-industrial climate. The study also found that the intensity of the storms was likely amplified by warmer temperatures. The conclusion was that climate change probably contributed to the severity of the outbreak, but the contribution was not definitive. The study's authors cautioned that more research is needed. The Chattanooga tornado also raised questions about building codes in Tennessee. Tennessee is one of the few states in the Southeast that does not have a statewide building code. Local jurisdictions are responsible for adopting and enforcing their own codes. Hamilton County had adopted the International Residential Code in 2008, but enforcement was uneven. Many homes in the affected area were built before the code was adopted. They were constructed with unreinforced masonry, brick veneer, or wood framing that was not tied to the foundation. These types of construction perform poorly in tornadoes. After the tornado, the city of Chattanooga formed a task force to review building standards. The task force recommended adopting updated wind uplift standards for new construction in areas prone to severe weather. The standards would require stronger connections between the roof and walls, and between the walls and foundation. The recommendations were presented to the City Council in early 2020. The council voted to adopt the standards for all new residential construction. The vote was unanimous, but the standards only apply to new construction. Existing homes remain vulnerable. Retrofitting an existing home to meet tornado-resistant standards can cost between $5,000 and $15,000. Many homeowners cannot afford that cost. The tornado also had an impact on emergency management procedures in Chattanooga. The city had a tornado siren system before April 12, 2020. The system consisted of 17 sirens located throughout the city, but the sirens were not intended to be heard indoors. They were designed for outdoor warning. The National Weather Service recommends that sirens be used only as a supplement to other warning methods, such as weather radios and cell phone alerts. In Hickory Valley, many residents said they did not hear the sirens inside their homes. Some said they did not have a weather radio. Others said they had their cell phones on silent because they were asleep. In response, the city launched a campaign to distribute weather radios to low-income neighborhoods. The campaign was funded by a grant from the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency. By the end of 2021, the city had distributed over 1,000 weather radios. The radios are programmed to automatically activate for tornado warnings. They are set to the loudest volume. The campaign also included educational materials about what to do when the radio sounds. But the radios only work if they are plugged in and turned on. They only work if the user knows what the alarm means. They only work if the user has time to react. The broader question of how to improve tornado warning effectiveness is a subject of ongoing research. The National Weather Service is exploring a concept called impact-based warnings. These warnings go beyond simply stating the time and location of a tornado threat. They also describe the expected impact. This tornado will be deadly. This tornado will level homes. This tornado will be catastrophic. The goal is to convey urgency in a way that compels action. The Chattanooga tornado would have warranted an impact-based warning at the highest level, but the warning was issued only 2 minutes before impact. The most urgent language in the world cannot compensate for a lack of time. The human stories from the Chattanooga tornado continue to reverberate through the community. The family of the 8-year-old boy established a scholarship in his name at a local elementary school. The scholarship is awarded each year to a student who shows kindness and perseverance. The first recipient was a girl whose family also lost their home in the tornado. She wrote an essay about how her friend's bravery inspired her to keep going. The scholarship fund has raised about $30,000. It is not enough to cover college tuition, but it is a way to keep a memory alive. The husband of the nurse who died later remarried. He moved to a different part of the city. He told a local newspaper that he still had nightmares about the sound of the wind. He said he heard it in his sleep. He said his therapist told him it would take time. He said he was not sure how much time he had. The city of Chattanooga marked the 5th anniversary of the tornado on April 12, 2025. A ceremony was held at the park that was built on the site of the first touchdown. The mayor spoke. The names of the 5 victims were read aloud. A moment of silence was observed. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. It was attended by about 200 people. The sun was out. The temperature was 68 degrees. There were no clouds in the sky. The Chattanooga tornado is not the deadliest tornado in Tennessee history. The 2011 super outbreak killed more than 50 people in the state. The 2008 outbreak killed 32. But the Chattanooga tornado is notable because it happened during a pandemic during a holiday at night with almost no warning. It is a reminder that tornadoes do not follow schedules. They do not respect holidays. They do not wait for people to be ready. The only defense is preparation and time. In Chattanooga, both were in short supply. The science continues to advance. Researchers are developing new radar technologies that can scan the atmosphere faster and more frequently. They are working on machine learning algorithms that can predict tornado formation from satellite data. They are studying the role of trees and terrain in tornado behavior. But the gap between what is possible and what is practical remains large. A perfect tornado warning system would require dense radar coverage, real-time data processing, and instant communication to every person in the path. That system does not exist today. It may not exist for decades. What does exist is the memory of what happened. The families remember, the first responders remember, the meteorologists remember, the city remembers, the vacant lots are still there, the rebuilt houses are stronger, the trees that were planted after the tornado are growing. The children who survived are older now, some of them have moved away, some of them stayed, they go to school, they play outside, they watch the sky, they know what a tornado warning sounds like. They know that 2 minutes is not a guarantee. They know that some things cannot be predicted. They live with that knowledge. The next tornado might not give even that. The next tornado might give nothing at all. At 4:53 in the morning on April 12, 2020, the National Weather Service radar in Morristown, Tennessee detected a debris ball in eastern Hamilton County. The radar had been upgraded to dual polarization technology in 2012, a system that could distinguish between rain, hail, and debris. The debris ball appeared at 4:54. 2 minutes later, at 4:57, the NWS issued a tornado warning for southeastern Hamilton County, including the Hickory Valley area. The warning was explicit. A confirmed large and extremely dangerous tornado was located near Lupton City, moving east at 45 miles per hour. But by the time the warning was broadcast, the tornado had already struck the Woodmore and East Ridge neighborhoods. The warning reached cell phones at 4:58. The tornado had already carved its 3.4-mile path. The time between the first debris detection and the warning was exactly 3 minutes. That 3 minutes was not enough. The radar beam from the KHTX tower on Signal Mountain was scanning at an elevation angle of 1.5 degrees. At the distance of the tornado, about 20 miles from the radar, the beam's centerline was already 1,000 feet above ground level. The tornado was on the ground when the radar first recorded the debris signature. The storm was moving at 45 miles per hour. The time required to process the data, issue the warning, and push it to wireless carriers was measured in minutes. The warning system was designed for a different scenario: a tornado forming at altitude, with time to track its rotation and issue a warning before it reached the ground. In Chattanooga, that scenario did not happen. The tornado was already on the ground, moving fast in the dark, hidden by heavy rain. The radar was looking over its head. What happened in the seconds before the warning is harder to reconstruct. At 4:49, the NWS had issued a severe thunderstorm warning for the area. The storm had been producing large hail and damaging winds. At 4:52, a trained spotter reported a funnel cloud near the Tennessee River in Lupton City. The report was relayed by ham radio to the NWS office. The spotter was looking west toward the river. He could not see the ground below the funnel because of the trees and houses. At 4:53, the spotter revised his report. The funnel was now on the ground. He could see debris rising. He estimated the tornado was 3 blocks wide. He transmitted that update at 4:54. The NWS received it at 4:55. By then, the tornado was already in Hickory Valley. The spotter's report was the only eyewitness account of the tornado before it struck the first homes. He was a volunteer with the Hamilton County Emergency Management Agency. He had been trained by the NWS. He had a clear view of the river and the open land north of the river. He did not have a radio to alert residents directly. He only had his ham radio linked to the NWS. He did exactly what he was trained to do. The system worked as designed, but the system was never designed for a tornado that formed so close to the ground in darkness with a lead time measured in seconds. The National Weather Service later conducted a service assessment of the Chattanooga tornado. The assessment was released in August 2010. It concluded that the NWS had followed its own procedures. The warning was issued within the standard time frame. The radar signature was identified as quickly as possible. The warning language was appropriate for the level of threat. The assessment also noted that the tornado was a nighttime, rain-wrapped, fast-moving event, a combination that makes detection extremely difficult. The assessment praised the spotter who reported the tornado. It noted that without his report, the warning might have been issued even later. It also noted that the tornado's path was narrow, only 400 yards wide, and that the area was heavily forested. Trees obscured the view from both the radar and the spotter, but the assessment also raised questions. Why was there no low-level radar coverage over the storm? The NWS radar network consists of over 160 Doppler radars across the continental United States. These radars are spaced approximately 140 miles apart. Between the radars, coverage is not uniform. In mountainous terrain, radar beams are blocked by ridges. In Hamilton County, the KHTX radar sits on Signal Mountain, but it is partially blocked by the ridge and valley topography to the south. The radar cannot see below about 800 feet in parts of the county. The tornado formed in a gap where the radar's lowest beam was blocked by Monteagle Mountain and the Raccoon Mountain Ridge. The NWS relies on spotters and satellite imagery to fill these gaps. On the morning of April 12th, the satellite imagery showed a rapidly growing thunderstorm at 4:48, but satellite cannot detect a tornado. It can only see the cloud tops. The assessment recommended that the NWS explore the use of supplemental low-level radar systems, known as gap-filler radars. These are smaller mobile radars that can be deployed in areas where the main radar network is blocked, but gap-filler radars are expensive. A single mobile radar costs about $200,000. To cover all the gaps in Tennessee would require dozens of units. The NWS has not funded any new gap-filler radars since 2006. The recommendation from the Chattanooga assessment remains on a list of unaddressed items. The tornado was also a challenge for the city's emergency notification system. Chattanooga used a system called CodeRed to send alerts to cell phones. Residents could sign up to receive text messages and phone calls for tornado warnings, but CodeRed only works if the resident's phone number is registered. In Hickory Valley, only about 30% of households were registered for CodeRed at the time of the tornado. The city had not aggressively promoted the system. After the tornado, the city launched a targeted campaign to increase registration. By 2021, registration rates in affected zip codes had reached 65%, but that still means 1 in 3 households is not registered. The tornado also exposed a gap in the way wireless emergency alerts are delivered to cell phones. The wireless emergency alert system sends messages to any phone within range of a cell tower that is in the warning area. But cell towers cover a wide area, and the WEA system does not know exactly where the phone is. During the Chattanooga tornado, some phones in areas north of the tornado path received the alert, while some phones inside the tornado's path did not. That was because the cell tower closest to Hickory Valley was not in the warning polygon. The warning polygon was drawn by the NWS based on the radar track. It was shaped like a long rectangle. The cell tower was just outside the rectangle, so the WEA was not sent to that tower. Phones connected to that tower did not receive the alert. The NWS later revised its warning polygon guidance to include all towers within the path of the storm, not just those exactly on the radar track. The human toll of the tornado is not fully captured by the death count of 5. 253 people were injured. Of those, 50 were admitted to hospitals. 30 of those had critical injuries, crush injuries, lacerations, head trauma. The emergency room at Erlanger Medical Center received its first victims at 5:02, 5 minutes after the tornado lifted. The hospital had activated its disaster response plan at 4:58 when the warning was issued. By 5:05, the ER was operating on emergency generators. The power was out over a wide area. Surgeons worked by flashlight for the first hour. The hospital treated 43 patients in the first 2 hours. 11 were children, 1 was an infant. The mother had been killed. The infant was found alive under a mattress covered in splinters but uninjured. The response was complicated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Tennessee had a stay-at-home order in effect at the time. Masks and social distancing were required. Emergency workers had to wear N95 masks and face shields while searching for survivors. The shelters that opened were limited to 50% capacity. Some families chose to stay in their damaged homes rather than risk exposure to the virus in a crowded shelter. The Red Cross had to adapt its protocols. They set up separate intake areas for people with symptoms. They provided masks and hand sanitizer at every station, but the emotional support that usually accompanies disaster response was minimized. Volunteers could not hug survivors, they could not hold hands, they could only speak from a distance. One volunteer described it as support with a barrier. The long-term mental health impact in Chattanooga is still being measured. A study published in 2023 by the University of Tennessee College of Medicine followed 120 survivors of the tornado for 2 years. The study found that 37% of survivors met the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder 6 months after the tornado. At 2 years, that number had dropped to 22%, but it remained higher than the national average for tornado survivors, which is about 15%. The study attributed the higher rate to the combination of the tornado and the pandemic. Survivors had to cope with the trauma of the tornado while also dealing with isolation, economic uncertainty, and the fear of a virus they could not see. The study recommended that mental health services be integrated into all disaster response plans, not just physical health services. The tornado also cost money. The total economic impact was estimated at $480 million. That includes property damage, business interruption, lost wages, and emergency response costs. The federal government spent another $30 million in disaster assistance, mostly through FEMA. But FEMA funding for individual assistance was limited. The average grant to a homeowner in Hickory Valley was $12,000. The average cost to rebuild a destroyed home was $210,000. Many families did not have insurance. Only 41% of homeowners in the area had flood insurance, and tornado damage is not covered by flood insurance. Standard homeowners policies do cover wind damage, but the deductibles are often high. Some deductibles for wind damage are 5% of the home's value. For a $200,000 home, that is $10,000 out of pocket. Many families could not afford that amount. They moved out of the city. They rented apartments in other counties. The neighborhoods that were hit hardest have not fully recovered. Of the 420 homes that were destroyed or rendered uninhabitable, only 280 had been rebuilt by 2025. The rest remain vacant lots or have been sold to developers who are building townhouses at higher price points. The tornado changed the way emergency managers in Tennessee prepare for nocturnal storms. The state now has a policy that requires all county emergency management agencies to test their outdoor warning sirens at night at least once a month. That policy was implemented in January 2020. It was a direct result of the Chattanooga tornado, but the sirens remain only a supplement. The primary recommendation from the NWS assessment is still the same. Every household should have a weather radio and emergency plan. That recommendation has been made for decades. It has not been followed by the majority of the population. The science of nocturnal tornadoes is still evolving. Data from the Chattanooga tornado has been used to run high-resolution simulations at the National Severe Storms Laboratory. The simulations try to understand why this particular storm produced a tornado in the early morning hours. Tornadoes usually form in the late afternoon when the sun has heated the ground. At night, the atmosphere is usually stable. But on April 12, 2020, a strong low-pressure system from Arkansas pulled in warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. That air was unusually warm for April. The sea surface temperatures in the Gulf were 1.5 degrees above the 30-year average. That extra warmth added moisture to the air. The moisture was lifted by a cold front. The front stalled over the Tennessee Valley. The combination created a narrow band of intense instability. The band was only 20 miles wide. Within that band, the wind shear was strong enough to produce rotating thunderstorms. One of those thunderstorms produced the tornado. The simulation shows that the rotation started at about 4,000 feet above the ground. It then descended rapidly. The tornado touched down at 4:53. The simulation also shows that if the sea surface temperatures had been average, the instability would have been lower and the tornado might not have formed. The connection between climate change and nocturnal tornadoes is an area of active research. The study from World Weather Attribution mentioned earlier also looked at the nighttime timing and concluded that warmer temperatures due to climate change can extend the diurnal cycle of tornado formation. The tornado season appears to be expanding into the early morning hours. That is a trend that climate models predict will continue. For the residents of Hickory Valley, the science matters less than the memory. Survivors still hold the same image: the sound of the wind, the breaking of glass, the crushing weight of debris, the silence after. They have learned to live with that image. They gather each year on April 12th at the Hickory Valley Community Center. They bring photos of the victims. They release balloons. They hold a moment of silence at 4:54. The ceremony is informal. It lasts about 20 minutes. Then they go home. Some of them live in houses that were rebuilt. Some of them live in apartments. Some of them live in other states. They all agree on one thing: the tornado came without a warning. The next one might too. The systems that failed them have been improved in small ways, but the fundamental problem remains. The radar cannot see what is happening near the ground at night. The warning cannot be issued fast enough. The technology cannot outrun the meteorology. The line between preparedness and helplessness remains as thin as a watchful eye on a dark sky.